Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Nick Bodmer.
I'm Griffin Hammond, and on this week's episode, we're discussing licensing music for your film and videos.
Plus, your questions about variable ND filters, shooting in 6K, and how to price your freelance work. Hello, Mr. Hammond. How are you?
I'm good. Today, I don't think I'm going to make a mistake with recording.
Knock on wood. Knock on wood.
Last episode, I forgot to put a fresh SD card in. I did that today. Got fresh SD card in my audio recorder too. We're all good.
You know what I did? When I put the battery in my camera, I put the SD card in. The very first thing I do is format the SD card.
Yeah.
Every time. It's just habit.
Yeah. I've gotten into this bad habit where I have 8 SD cards, 32 gig cards, but I'm shooting so much stuff and traveling so much and can't always remember which stuff I've backed up. And so it's I get to the process of backing up eventually, but I kind of sit with 5 SD cards full of stuff, and I don't really remember which ones are empty. So yeah, it's just a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess when you're such a busy guy like Griffin Hammond.
So
I don't have that problem. This is all I record.
Yeah, it's a little easier for you. We landed on No Film School.
Did we?
Yeah. So
why didn't you tell me that? I guess
I didn't know until
now.
yesterday. Yeah. Our episode 20, we were talking about. You remember I was sharing with you how to remember the f-stop scale.
Oh yeah.
And then I decided that would make a really nice standalone YouTube video. So just a 90-second video I threw up on YouTube. I didn't even monetize it because I felt like it was so short, and it's really just a promo for the podcast. But it got a fair number of views on its own. I think it got up to 6,000 views, and then No Film School picked it up, and now it has 17,000 views.
Sweet. Well, that's kind of cool.
And it's kind of cool the way that No Film School says where they got something from. So they credit Petapixel for where they picked it up from, and then Petapixel credits ISO 1200, another online videography forum. So you can kind of see how something gets popular on the internet, how it rises through the ranks.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff. A hat tip, right? Where you say, "This is where I saw this cool thing on the internet." Yeah, exactly.
I mean, ISO 1200 is a photography magazine online, and they actually pick up a lot of things that I do. So I really appreciate that. But it's interesting to see how it can build upon that. It always takes some media outlet to pick it up for it to move up the chain to bigger outlets.
That's funny. Oh, and this is an excerpt from Hey, Indie Filmmakers. Watch full episodes at Hey.film.
Yeah.
That's nice.
And I always, it's funny, I get notifications every time No Film School tweets anything, but I didn't even notice it was about me. Their tweet was look, it's the easiest way to memorize the f-stop scale. I didn't even notice it was mine until someone texted me last night, my friend Chad, and said, hey, you're on No Film School.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations to you, sir.
And you're too.
You're very famous. I guess, yeah, I'm in the video too, even though it's just a little thing. I'm the guy who's an idiot and doesn't know how to do it, though. I get to be your foil.
You did teach me something the other day, though. Tell me more about this iTunes thing, that they're changing the way analytics work.
Oh, yeah. So Apple is updating their podcast platform. So Apple kind of runs the largest podcast directory in the world. They kind of came up with podcasts with the iPod. And the Apple Podcast Player is like 80% of podcasts get listened to on the Apple Podcast Player. So they just announced they're going to be providing a lot more analytic data to the podcast producers themselves. So, instead of just knowing we have 5,000 downloads or whatever, we'll know how many people play, how much do they play, where do they skip, are they skipping ads, things like that. So it'll be kind of interesting. A little shake-up in the podcast world.
Right now I'm looking at the current analytics we have through PodTrack, and indeed most of our listeners, most people who aren't watching on YouTube that are listening to the podcast version, are listening through iTunes. iTunes is by far the most popular podcasting platform. But these analytics that we have now through PodTrack don't give us the audience retention data. That's so cool. That's such a cool metric on YouTube. You can see when people fall off your video, when they leave.
All right.
And we don't currently get that, so I guess we'll get that somehow through iTunes. Do you know when this goes into effect?
I don't actually, but they've announced it, so I would assume pretty soon.
Yeah.
So a lot of cool stuff coming out of WWDC this year.
Well, and just to get our analytics for the podcast, it's a little bit wonky. Podtrack works by we upload the MP3 file for the podcast, and then we just put this like Podtrack URL in front of it. So everyone who downloads it, they're technically going to Podtrack first and then getting redirected to the file.
Yeah, Podtrack just inserts themselves so that they can, tally it and say, there's a download check, there's a download check.
Yeah. Hopefully you're
nice.
all okay, listeners, with the privacy issues that raises. I mean, it's anonymized data, but now we get to know where you're listening geographically and also what kind of device you're listening on. Like I can see that we have some Android.
That's just the way the internet works, right? Anytime you go to any website or download any file, you are requesting information from a server, and a server tracks that information. So this just does it in a way that makes it easier for us to graph it and stuff like that.
And it's helpful information for us to know how to best reach people and if we're neglecting a certain set of people that are listening.
Is our YouTube audience still the biggest, or...?
Yeah, that's still 85% of our audience. Although I'm seeing that I haven't even logged into Podtrack in like a couple months, but I'm seeing that we have around 3,000 unique listeners per month. And I imagine you can almost quadruple that or multiply that by 5, and that's our YouTube audience.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool.
Well, we actually have 12 questions from the audience to answer today, so I kind of want to jump right into it.
A dozen.
And our first question is a good one. It's a YouTube comment from Malaz Halabi that kind of builds on last week. We had a question about Creative Commons music and how to find free music. But Malaz wants to know, he's making a short film and wants to use classical music like Beethoven and Mozart. And knowing that a lot of times old music like that, it's in the public domain. Can he use that for free? I mean, these authors, these composers have died a long time ago, and he's wondering how to use that in films.
Well, the music itself might be free of copyright, but the recording usually is not. Am I on the right track there?
Yeah, that's the catch that most people don't realize is there's two creative works happening with a piece of music. There's the composition. So sure, the composition itself might be in the public domain. If you're a pianist and you want to go perform a Beethoven song, you may be able to do that without paying anyone anything. But now you're doing the second half of the creative work. You're the one performing it. If you just want to use a song in your film, chances are someone performed it, some modern orchestra, and maybe their recording studio recorded it. I mean, and they did work. They had to settle the levels. So these are all creative works that you can't just go and steal. So you actually need to get their permission as well.
And how does one do that? Did you license any music for Sriracha?
I did, and it was a little simple for Sriracha because what I did was I went onto SoundCloud and looked for Sriracha-themed music. I looked for titles that were... I just literally searched Sriracha and found titles and lyrics, and I found things that were related to Sriracha in some way. And most of these artists were pretty DIY artists. They're putting it on SoundCloud because they are the ones that composed it and recorded it themselves. Mm-hmm. So it was easy for me to find who to talk to. I didn't have to go through some recording, I don't even know what those are called. Those recording labels that represent everyone.
Labels, that's right, yeah.
I just emailed these artists directly and I said, hey, do you mind if I use your music in a film? And one, I think you'll be excited for this because I'm making a film about Sriracha, and they, for the most part, were excited to be involved. And two, I'm going to show the name and artist for each song in the film because I actually want the audience to realize what it is. So under those terms, all the artists were willing to share their music for free, except for one artist I paid $200 for the license to cut it up the way I needed to cut it up and show it forever in the film.
And what kind of license did you get? Did you have to go for one of these special licenses, or did you just do kind of your own thing?
Well, I think with the exception of one of the songs, all of the composers and recordists, I don't know what the word is, were the same person. So I did use what's called a combined master use and synchronization license.
Okay.
And those are the two halves. And I think you may know some of this, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think the master use part of the license refers to the recording, the act of recording, and the synchronization refers to the composition.
That's my understanding. Yep.
Yeah.
Like
so,
the master license, I think, is literally about the master recording of the song. Like the,
do
the
I
actual,
have the right to use that?
Yeah, exactly. What they laid down in the studio.
Yeah. So I suppose in some cases you might have one master use license, one synchronized license, and you are sending them to two different people to get permission from both entities. But in my case, I wrote up a combined license with a place for both entities to sign, but in a lot of cases it was the same person. So I'll share that license in the show notes at Hey.film. I've said this before, I'm not a lawyer, so it's probably not an airtight legal document, but I think it's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, makes sense. Handy.
And I do want to mention another thing about music. I mean, I've licensed some music for Sriracha. I also licensed some music for Hand Cut, and that I paid through a service called Noisely, and I paid $400 per track. I used 3 tracks in the film, so I paid $1,200 for music, which was a lot for me, but that was also a paid project, and I felt like I could invest that in a film I cared about. But what happens a lot is, we've done a lot of Creative Commons stuff. We're using free music as long as we're giving credit to the artist, and in some cases not using it in commercial work if that's what the artist wants. But one way that people might use music is through fair use. And one big misconception that I think people run into with fair use is that they think they can use people's music as parody. Like you could take Taylor Swift's latest song and like write new lyrics to it.
Okay. Maybe I'm falling into this trap because that sounds okay to me.
Well, see, here's where it's dangerous. Parody really should be commentary on the thing that you're stealing. So like if we've done this on the show before. We've played clips of other things. We've played short music clips from other things. But it's because we're making some comment about the original work. I mean, if we said, hey, have you heard the new Taylor Swift song? It's really good. Let me play you 5 seconds from it just to prove how good it is. And we play it and then we say, couldn't you hear how that beat was really well produced or something? That's commentary, and we can do that.
Yep.
But if I decide I want to make some commentary about Donald Trump and I want to do it through a Taylor Swift song and change all her lyrics to be about Donald Trump, now I'm just making commentary on Donald Trump, but I'm not making commentary on Taylor Swift. So why am I stealing her work to do that? In fact, it gets even more dangerous if I'm now hurting the market for her work. If people would listen to our version of the song instead of listening to hers, then that could be problematic.
That's interesting. I think I heard or read once that like Weird Al, who's well known for all these parodies, he always gets the artist's permission first, and if they say no, he doesn't do the song.
Right. Yeah, he's actually licensing the music, which is so funny because people are always using Weird Al as an excuse. Like, well, Weird Al does it. I thought I could steal other people's work and make parody. But it's not what he's doing.
And let me test my license here knowledge. So you would need a sync license to do a parody like that, but not a master license.
Right. Yeah, you would need the synchronization because you're taking Taylor Swift's composition, but not the actual recording. You're probably going to go record it yourself. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Good distinction.
But I would always do this at Bloomberg. I mean, we were often doing comedy stuff and based on politics and often pulling in pop culture. And there were times that we would take someone else's creative work and it was okay because it fell under a fair use. But I was constantly counseling my coworkers that this is when we can do it and this is when we can't. We need to make sure we're actually making a comment on the artist.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if Taylor Swift gets in the news and we want to write a song about Taylor Swift through her own music, we probably could.
You seem really fixated on Taylor Swift. I'm just going to put it out there. Not sure what that's about.
I think I was reading the news about her now streaming her albums on Spotify.
Thank God. Our
She's also such a popular artist.
Over.
Just a great example.
I like Taylor Swift. I got no problems.
All right, so let's get to our next question is from Rain. This is an email from Rain. She's a musician who is about to release a film of her own, and she looked at Sriracha and noticed that I'm on Vimeo on demand and on iTunes, and she's just wondering, did I start with Vimeo and then move to iTunes? I think you know my history.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. Your accidental windowing of your film, which worked out well for you, I think was kind of the takeaway. Is kind of, I'm not sure if it matters which you do first, but I think you would advocate doing them at different times. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I didn't do them at different times because it was smart strategy. It turned out to be, but I just did it because I had limited bandwidth. It was easier for me to launch it on Vimeo first, and I liked the Vimeo platform. And then when I got around to it, when I had the time to think about it again, I decided to go on iTunes. But it turned out having a premiere in each place was powerful because you can promote the launch on Vimeo. And then 3 months later, you give yourself a new thing to celebrate. Now there's a premiere on iTunes. And each premiere comes with, each platform will kind of promote that new thing. So, and I think I found that having a premiere on iTunes even helped my Vimeo sales. So they all benefit each other. And if you can do what's called windowing, where you release it on several platforms at different times, that's beneficial.
Nice. We've got an email from Willie. He says, the letters look like the sauce. How'd you create them? They added an awesome touch. I assume he's talking about the Sriracha opening title.
Yeah. Yeah, I put in Willie's last email to me. We were kind of going back and forth because he was asking about the letters, and I was like, wait, what letters are you talking about? And he was talking about in Sriracha. Yeah, I have a like a behind the scenes video I'll put in the show notes at Hey.film about how I created the practical effect of hot sauce handwriting. But it comes from the idea that I don't really do digital effects very well. I can't do like animation. I can do some basic practical visual effects. So it was a lot easier for me to have my friend Mallory write the letters physically over like a blue screen and then just drop out the blue and put it on the video. And it looks really nice.
Yeah, as I recall, you've basically got a sheet of glass with a blue screen behind it and shooting straight down with the camera. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, just knowing from a gravity perspective that if we didn't write it flat, it would just smear, it would slide away. So we're actually pointing the camera straight down at this piece of plastic, it's clear plastic. And I actually had to elevate the plastic over the green screen just so that it would not cast a shadow.
Smart stuff. We'll check out that video. But not your handwriting, interestingly.
Right. Well, I wrote it myself at first, and it didn't look very good. So then I had Mallory, Mallory Simons worked on the credits for Sriracha. She's a graphic designer, but she's also a very talented artist and typography sort of artist, and she can do handwriting very well.
Nice. Well, I think it looks great.
We have a YouTube comment from Kano in the Philippines. That's actually his username. And Kano is wondering what we think about variable ND filters.
They're expensive.
Well, and you were just asking me about these. Did you decide to get one?
I decided not to get one yet. The only reason I would need it is for time lapses, and I just decided maybe I can add blur later if I need it and just shoot with a what do you call it? Shorter shutter time.
Yeah, or longer shutter, or you'll shoot with shorter.
Yes,
because you don't have the filter yet. Yeah.
Right.
I have this Polaroid variable ND filter. It's a 58 millimeter, meaning it fits on my lenses that have a 58 millimeter opening. I don't know what that's called. The outer part of the lens.
Filter screw.
Yeah, it's not the focal length of the lens. It's the outside of the lens where filters go.
Yeah.
And many of my lenses are 58 millimeter, including the 12 to 35 millimeter. And that just sounds confusing to say that. Yeah. My 12 to 35 millimeter lens has a 58 millimeter opening or something. I don't know. But I have this Polaroid variable ND filter. It's only $35. I'll put it in the show notes. I don't know how great the quality is, though, the optical quality of it. In fact, when you close it to its like darkest, that's when it starts to look really bad. It actually doesn't. The way that these variable ND filters work is you turn them, and these two pieces of glass, as they turn together, they create lighter or darker effects. And when you go to the darkest part, it starts to kind of create this shadow that doesn't affect the whole image equally. So you can't really use it at its darkest. You just have to kind of be careful about where you're using it. But I also just wonder, is a $35 filter, especially with 2 pieces of glass, surely that's not going to be the greatest.
That would be my guess. That would be my guess.
So what I've ended up doing is, like right now I'm shooting with a B&W ND filter that I like. It's an ND 0.9, which I use for video, and then I have a 3.0 ND that I use for time lapses. But it's just a solid piece of glass. And one of the reasons I went to it is for shooting time lapses, this variable ND filter is just kind of thick because there's 2 pieces of glass in it.
Mm-hmm.
And on a wide angle lens, I would create some vignetting because it's sticking too far away from the lens.
Can't have that.
So I kind of like the flatter single element ND filter. And also, this one's a little bit pricier. I'll put this in the show notes as well. I can't even remember how much it costs, probably $50 to $70. And I just assume it's good quality.
So you think I should get one? Are they that important?
I guess if you only need it for time lapses, then you should probably get like the one I have. Just you don't need a variable one. But if you feel like you want to shoot video with shallow depth of field and appropriate shutter speeds, and you want to do time lapses, then yeah, I think a variable ND filter could make sense. If you only want to buy one.
Hey, I had a question kind of related to this.
Yeah.
I was watching your GH5 setup video like a week and a half ago. I think we talked about that already.
Yeah.
One of the things you said is you enabled some feature that lets you go lower on the ISO than you would be able to otherwise. Am I remembering that properly?
I can't remember if you have to turn on the feature. I think you do. I think it's just called extended ISO.
Mm-hmm.
And it drops your usable ISO on the camera to 100, where the default is 200.
So,
which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's
half
as much light. So yeah.
Well, no, but my question is, why is that a hidden option? Is there a trade-off that we don't know about? Like, is the image quality not as good at that ISO for some reason, or why is that a hidden feature? You know, that's actually something I don't understand very well. A lot of people talk about the native ISO on cameras and seem to be very concerned about like shooting in a preferred ISO, and I've never experienced any. I'm not seeing any loss of quality from shooting at a low ISO. So yeah, I don't know why. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for nothing.
Yeah, no help there. I guess I could at least speak to the fact that I'm happy with the quality that's coming out of 100 ISO, or at 200, or at 400, or at 800. So
it seems like as we talk about ND filters and basically wanting to step down how much light is coming in, that's one way to do it too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've taken advantage of the fact that the GH5, unlike the GH4, can shoot at 100 ISO, which means it's like that's almost like half the time that I might need an ND filter. I no longer need it because I can have my light input on the camera.
All right, we got a YouTube comment from Jim Horn, who wants to know, Griffin, from start to finish, how long did it take you to complete hand cut?
That was a time-sensitive project because I was given the pre-production camera and had to have it done in 2 weeks. And so I gave myself exactly 2 weeks. I think I shot over about 5 days and then edited over around 5 days. I mean, it was about 2 weeks of work. I think it was around 80 to 100 hours of work. I'm sure some of the editing was overlapping the shooting. I think it was somewhere around 50 hours of editing, but it was 8 hours of footage that I captured to make a 5-minute film.
Wow. It's amazing how much effort goes into these things.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised the editing... I feel like maybe my editing amount is wrong. I probably spent less time sleeping than I think. And probably spent
I was just going to say, that sounds light for you because you edit for a long time.
Well, and just ratio-wise, it seems weird to think that I might have spent 30 hours on production and 50 hours on post-production, because generally my ratio is like a multiple of 3 or 4. So you would think if I spent 30 hours shooting that I would spend 120 hours editing. So yeah. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
You do have a tendency to edit into the night.
Yeah. We have another question, another YouTube comment, a YouTube comment from Coyote Blue, but it's another question about hand cut. And the question is, I shot and edited hand cut in 60p while most docs use 24p. So is this something to do with the GH5 specifically or just personal preference? And this was just a feature that the camera had, that it could shoot 4K 60p, and I was very curious about if I would like the look of 60p, because I know not everyone likes it, and I didn't know how I felt about it, and I just wanted to have the experience of shooting that way and seeing if I liked the way that it came out. Because I don't love the way every 60p thing looks, but I kind of thought, if I shoot it the way that I want to shoot it and try to think about it cinematically, I don't think that 24 frames is what makes things look cinematic. I think it's the lighting and the movement that does that. So I figured if I just apply those same things to 60, let me see if I'm happy with the result. And I was. I liked the way it looked.
Would you do anything differently in the shooting of it now that you've worked with it in 60p throughout the editing process and seen your finished product? If you were going to shoot another 60p product, would you do anything differently in shooting?
I don't feel like I've learned anything that's changed how I would shoot, but I've spent so much time showing the film in non-60 environments. I'm always saying, like, okay, we're watching on this projector, it's in 1080 in 30 frames per second, but if you go on YouTube, you can watch it in its full 4K 60. So I kind of feel like it almost would have been fun for film festivals to take advantage of the fact that I shot it in 60 and it's not going to be shown in 60. So maybe present most of the film the way it is, but maybe change some of the chainsaw shots to slow motion versions. I probably could have made a few different versions of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think it'd be cool. We've got a YouTube comment from my Gmail. Hopefully that's not someone trying to scam people on.
Right. It seems like a real question, though. Just a weird YouTube username.
Can you please explain why 6K photo mode is actually called that? Because it's producing well short of a 6K resolution.
Do you know about the 6K photo mode on the GH5?
I mean, it basically shoots like a 30 frames per second 6K photos. Is that right? I mean, it's basically like a even higher than 4K limited video mode is kind of what it sounds like to me. But then you can pick which photo you want, and it gets rid of the rest automatically or something.
Yeah, it's a feature that's kind of focused on photographers, but it feels like a video feature. It's like you're shooting this higher resolution image 30 times a second, which is video, but it's marketed mostly towards photographers. Like, you can do it as a burst, and then you definitely won't miss the shot because you've got 30 frames picked up every second. But the confusing part is that my Gmail points out is that it's not 6K video. You would think 6K video is 6,000 pixels wide, approximately, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that. This is actually, what is it? It's a photo. If you're shooting in 4:3, it's a 4,992 pixels across, 3744 pixels down. So it's about 5K wide. And I've talked with Panasonic about this, that 6K is kind of confusing, but I understand exactly why they've done this. It's because they had a photo mode on the GH4 called 4K photo, and that would do 4,000 pixels wide when you're shooting 16:9. So it was essentially the same thing as 4K video. But you're shooting at 30 frames per second.
But this is now 4:3, so you've got a little more pixels vertically, so they upped the number.
Right. So it used to be 8 megapixels for 4K photo, and now it's 18 megapixels. It's a lot bigger. And so while it's not as wide as what 6K video should be, it is approximately the same number of pixels. So I actually looked at, like, if you triple 1080 video, you get to 5760 pixels across, which many people consider 6K. That's what's kind of weird about talking about 4K when sometimes we're talking about 3800 pixels, and when we talk about 6K, or sometimes we're talking about 5700 pixels. We're not quite at 6000, but 5700 is considered close enough. And if you take that image, that's an 18 megapixel image, and you're pretty much just stretching it down and compressing it horizontally to get this image that the GH5 is recording. So I understand why they do it, and I also understand why it's confusing.
Yep.
What'll be interesting, though, is that this summer they're releasing a firmware update for the GH5 that will improve that size even bigger to the full sensor, which I think is something like 5400 pixels. I can't remember. So it'll be even closer to 6K, and it'll be even cooler to shoot in.
It's crazy how much stuff they can add after the fact.
Right, yeah. I don't really understand how they do that, yeah.
GH5 must have a really fast processor in it. I wonder what they use.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the processor technology, except that it is more powerful, clearly.
You want to take this next? Yeah.
This is from Brendan, and Brendan is going to be shooting some video at a golf tournament that his company sponsors. This actually sounds really similar to, I used to shoot LPGA tournaments for State Farm because they sponsored those. And he's normally like an interview sort of shooter. So this is like first kind of run and gun shooting scenario for him. And he's just wondering like what gear and what pitfalls might there be. I mean, you shoot weddings, Nick, and he's thinking that could be helpful too. So what does he need to know?
Well, I mean, I've made the mistake before of using too heavy of a rig, especially when you're going to be on your feet all day. So I think going light is really important. So you might look into like a monopod or even a light tripod to bring with you as well, depending on the kind of stuff you're going to be shooting.
Yeah, I'm not a monopod user, but I could see in this environment, especially if you're crowding into the press area with other photographers, you might not have room to set up a full tripod.
I think a good zoom lens is going to be very helpful, right? Because you're not going to have a lot of time to be switching lenses and doing that kind of stuff. So like when I'm outdoors shooting wedding stuff, it's great to have I usually use the 14-140s. It gives me a ton of versatility in terms of, what my focal length is going to be.
Yeah, odds are he's not going to want a 12mm lens because he's not going to be getting inches away from the players.
I would also probably think about putting a shotgun mic directly on the camera. When you shoot all day at something like this, doing an audio singulator is probably going to be a mess from a separate recorder. So I would definitely try and record audio right on the camera and monitor that. What else? What do you think?
Well, if he's normally shooting indoors, maybe with limited light, I don't know what his normal setups are. If he's now going to be shooting out on a sunny day on the golf course, this may be a situation where he wants an ND filter. If he wants to maintain quick shutter speed, or not quick, slower shutter speed for appropriate amount of motion blur, and if he wants to maintain shallow depth of field, if that's what he wants, he may need to put an ND filter on his lens.
Yep. Go ahead and just rewind about 10 minutes and you'll have all the ND filter talk you want.
It's funny, I should find this old photo and put it in the show notes of me covering a LPGA event, and I remember there's a photo of me under an umbrella because I was like, we were taking photos and video and then putting them on Flickr. Like this was back when I worked at State Farm, and I was like, we're posting them on the Twitter account for State Farm. And I think it was raining on us, so I was just like shielding my laptop.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
I assumed when you said umbrella, I pictured you and your pale skin out in the sun.
Right, which is also something I deal with. Yeah. Yeah, I think mostly it's just going to be dealing with being outdoors all day. And I guess the other thing I think about is if he's going to be doing a lot of interviews or something, I don't know what he's shooting. That's where I have used a shoulder rig because maybe I need to mount the camera on the shoulder rig and use one of my clamps to mount an audio recorder, and maybe I have a wireless mic receiver or something. Like if these are all pieces you need to get the interviews you need, maybe it's better to put them all on one rig so you're not dropping things and carrying all these bags around.
Yep, makes sense.
So
we've got... Oh, go ahead. I was going to say we got a Facebook message from Jay. Thanks for inspiring me to pursue filmmaking, Griffin, is what he or she says. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
They just got their first client, and they're shooting and editing interviews on a weekly basis. What's a good going rate to charge per hour? They have no idea where to start.
This is a common question we get, or I get a lot.
Yep.
Nick, are you willing to say what your hourly rate is? Do you know what your hourly rate is?
Probably about, it was around $150 an hour.
Yeah. That's what I charged when I left Central Illinois, and now in New York I charge $200 an hour. And I also came up with a day rate of $1,500 a day, which is approximately the same thing. But it's based on a lot of things. In fact, I just said this the other day. Someone asked me this question in Manila, in the Philippines. And when I said I charged $200 an hour, there was kind of a gasp in the audience. Because, I mean, economically, the two economies are different, Manila and New York City. I can certainly charge more in New York City than if I lived and worked in Manila. But it's based on where I am. So I charge more in New York than I did in Central Illinois because the market's different. But it's also grown over the years as I've gotten better. I know that I'm better than I was even a year ago or 2 years ago. And my equipment, it's not just that I've purchased more equipment, it's that I have more equipment and I know how to use it. And so I bring a lot more skills, and hopefully I'm getting a lot more done per hour.
I almost wonder if your hourly rate's too low.
Yeah, I think
your skill set.
I kind of go back and forth. Like, I know that I charge more than some videographers here, but I also know that some DPs in New York charge that much per hour just for the pre-production work, and then they charge like a $600 rate per hour for the actual shooting.
Yep.
It kind of depends on your client. I mean, that's kind of the fallacy of setting an hourly rate, is that you could set an hourly rate, but a business client may be willing to pay you 4 times as much than a wedding couple, or just, a person who needs a videographer to help.
Yep, and don't forget about your editing time. I mean, that's stuff you got to charge for too, so you want to lay out, expectations for how long you think it's going to take, but they need to understand that, it could be plus or minus a good amount.
Right. Well, and I hear people charging anything from $20 an hour to, my rate and above. And some people charge different rates for the shooting and for the editing, which makes sense because the shooting can be much more difficult. But I feel like I'm a pretty quick shooter, and for me, I feel like the work is about the same level of effort. So I just charge the same rate for everything.
Makes sense.
But have you heard the argument for why hourly rates are just a bad idea for creative people?
No. So
I saw this video recently from a guy named Chris Do. He has a podcast called The Future, which is about the business of design. He's a graphic designer, logo designer.
Most business people value time. So if I could do a logo for you right now and you love it in 5 minutes, are you saying it's worth less than 18, or is it worth more now? Because I saved you a lot of time. We can go to market right now. It's worth more. So charging by the hour punishes me for being good.
It sounds like maybe going with a fixed fee or something aligns incentives between client and producer a little better.
Yeah, I think so. Like, if I say it's going to take me 5 months to make your video instead of 1 month, are you willing to spend more? Probably not, because you value having it done quicker.
Exactly.
So if I can say I can get you a great product done in 1 day, should I charge you way less? Like, you'll have it done. It's good. So yeah, I guess you have to kind of recognize that there's competing things happening, that you need to. It's if you set your hourly rate, it makes it really easy to price your products because you know how to price it. But that may not align with how you actually want to price it for a corporate client.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think the other thing is, if you're just getting started, I think this was where Jay was coming from, never having set an hourly rate before. My suggestion is to look at other jobs that you do, maybe your full-time job that you have. Let's say you make $10 an hour or $20 an hour at your job. What would it take for you to leave your job for a day, like take a vacation day? Are you willing to take a day off if someone is offering you X amount of money? So kind of like, what is the amount of money it would take to get you out the door? And I think that's a good starting point.
Sure.
I think for me, my freelance rate has always been triple my, working salary sort of. I mean, it's much better because it's not as
consistent.
Right.
Yep.
Here's a Facebook message from Ronnie, who is considering getting into real estate videos, which Nick and I have both done. And Ronnie doesn't have a lot of formal training, but is just wondering what kind of equipment we might use. And he says, of course, money is tight. So he's thinking of buying a used GH3. You have a used GH3 right now?
Boom, right there. Hello, used GH3.
Yes. I mean, that camera would be fine. We've shot plenty of videos with that camera.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think the GH3 would be perfectly fine. What you want is the widest lens possible. When I shot real estate, I was always a little constrained because I did not have a super wide angle lens, and I think you really need that giant wide angle lens. Really makes rooms look bigger. You can get the whole room in a single shot. So if you're going to spend money on any one piece of gear, that's what I would spend it on. I mean, what do you think? Do they have a rectilinear 10mm out there? Does that exist or no?
I don't know.
Because you don't want fisheye.
Back then, we didn't have like a 12 millimeter, which I think a 12 millimeter would do really well. I think, only had those 14 millimeters. We had like the 14 millimeter prime that you have, and we had the 14 to 140 millimeter. So that was the widest we could ever get.
And it was too tight, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was like good enough, but it would have been better to have. I think a 12 would do it. I don't know if you need much wider than that.
Much more than that? Okay.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Because if the audience can tell that it's really distorted, then it probably doesn't look great. But a 12 millimeter looks pretty natural, but makes everything look a lot bigger.
Yep.
I think that's the like, for example, the shot at the end of Sriracha, when I'm rising over the barrels. It is a massive place, but I'm shooting with my widest 12 millimeter lens to really make sure you experience the hugeness
massive.
of it.
Yeah. That's cool.
So I don't feel like you're manipulating the audience and lying to them when you shoot a real estate video with a wide lens. You just need a wide lens to show an entire room. And I think we've found that we would shoot all these close-ups. Like the client will want you to shoot all these close-ups. Like, oh, you have to show the beautiful faucets and the great cabinet handles and things like that. But then when I get to the editing, I always found this doesn't feel right for a real estate video. Like all the audience wants is to understand what it's like to walk into a space. So the glide cam was nice to introduce some movement.
Very cool.
And you may not even need any audio gear, although I think we've often had like interviews, or we've had like the real estate agent talk or something.
Yeah, usually I do a voiceover, so you're kind of getting toured through the home. So I'd have the agent write up a quick script, and then I would probably I would stand them outside the house basically and have them do a stand up, and then have the whole voiceover that way, and then I would cut the B-roll over it.
And real estate videos can be pretty easy because you have to recognize that they're going to live alongside a lot of other information. So maybe you don't even need to put any graphics in the piece. Maybe you don't even need voiceover, because chances are they're watching it next to a page that says the square footage and has all the information. And they're probably only going to watch the video for 40 seconds or a minute. They may not even watch the whole thing. So I don't think you want to put all the work and information into the video.
Yep.
This is a question directed at you, Nick. It's a YouTube comment from Mike Vrobel, who says he's an Apple nerd, and he's wondering about external GPUs, which you mentioned on our last episode.
Yep.
That now you can plug in an external GPU into the new MacBook Pro. Is that the case?
So they announced external GPUs, and they're shipping what they're calling a developer kit, which is... It's not a final product, so I wouldn't recommend going and buying one of these yet. I'm waiting for more official support to come out, but this is definitely pushing us down the right path. So I wouldn't go get the new external GPU enclosure yet. I think there's going to be a lot of compatibility problems and stuff as developers figure out how to make it work. And then when Apple releases whatever their consumer version is, the version you can get on, like Apple.com, that's when it's probably time to get one.
Yeah. So he's wondering if you're going to go, let's say you are going to go spend $600 on one of these things, what does it actually help with? If you're a video editor, he's wondering, does it help with display or transcoding, rendering?
I think all of the above. So Final Cut does use GPU acceleration for a ton of things. Now, straight exporting, probably not. I think that's a pretty CPU-bound operation. But rendering, if you're doing titles or motion graphics or anything like that, it's going to... lean heavily on the GPU, so definitely important for rendering and analysis and things like that.
And if you haven't done any rendering, sometimes I do projects where I don't even bother rendering until the end, or I'll never render in Final Cut. Sometimes I'll just export, but I assume when I'm exporting and haven't done any rendering, it's also doing the rendering as part of the exporting process.
Exactly right.
So I assume in that case it would use the GPU.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep. It can use it for color correction and anything where it's really adjusting pixels.
Yeah. So overall experience, you'll just be a faster editor and less lag, you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
The ability to play back in real time a lot more stuff than otherwise you'd have to wait and render it to actually see what it looks like.
So you're saying I should be interested in this?
Sure. No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Although, I think your current Mac Pro is pretty beefy still.
Yeah. Well, and you
Or
had mentioned
iMac, I should say. You
had
have a Mac
mentioned
Pro.
this would be a great way to only be a MacBook Pro editor. Like you bring your MacBook Pro home from traveling and you plug into your better GPU, and you're using it like a desktop.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's going to be my world if it all works out like I hope it will.
Our final question today comes in an email from Matt, and this is another question that's perfect for you, Nick. He backs up everything. He actually has a lot of footage. I guess a lot of his projects have 10 camera angles.
That's a lot of angles,
which seems like too many to me. But I don't know what his projects are. Maybe scale that down if you can. But he has 10 camera angles for these projects, so he's backing up all this raw footage, and he's backing up all his project files. Because he was saying, like, some people delete things. I certainly delete some project files when I'm done with them because I figure, like, this one I'm never going to need to access again. Or even if I do, the client doesn't have an expectation that I'll actually be able to access it. But he wants access to these. So he has a ton of stuff that he's backing up, and he's doing it on on-site hard drives, and he's also been using Amazon Drive. But just this week, Amazon Drive upped their price a lot. Did you see this?
I did. It broke my heart. So I saw this email come in, and I was kind of like, what is he talking about? I didn't hear about that. And then like a day later, I got a notification from Amazon, like, our unlimited plan is going away after your year expires. I was like,
Are you actively using Amazon Drive?
I am. So I use it as a backup for all my final video files. I have that automatically syncing out to Amazon Drive. And I'm trying to pull up the new pricing right now, so I have the
pricing.
Okay, perfect.
It's $60. It was $60 annually for unlimited data, which is great. Mm-hmm. Now it's $60 annually per terabyte.
Yeah.
So how many terabytes do you have?
I have less than a terabyte, so
okay. So
right
at the
now
moment,
I'm okay.
The pricing doesn't change for you,
but it still bothers me. It's like, no, I wanted that unlimited. Like I can get I have. Like I've got Dropbox, I've got iCloud Drive, I've got Microsoft OneDrive. Like I have all these online storage places. So I picked this because it was unlimited, and I knew I could just keep throwing stuff into it.
Right. You have to kind of stop using it because you know that you're eventually going to hit that.
Yeah. So I'm looking at Apple's iCloud Drive right now, only because I already pay them $10 a month for, it was 1 terabyte of storage, and now they just doubled it to 2 terabytes, which is actually a pretty good deal. So I'm going to find out if that makes sense to move my backups to after, this Amazon thing goes away. But I haven't decided yet.
He says that he's facing hundreds of dollars in storage costs on Amazon Drive. So I assume he must have 4 to 6 terabytes. So even he may be too big for Apple.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, so if his clients have an expectation that their raw footage is available forever, I mean, that is something I would charge a client for, if they want that. It might not be reasonable to assume you can keep all your raw footage forever. Or you just have to understand that there's going to be a cost associated with that, and you need to price your product appropriately to make that work.
So let's say he gets the money to do anything. One of his concerns is that he has pretty slow internet where he is. So he's wondering, especially if he has to start over, if he has to get off Amazon Drive, are there services where he can send off hard drives and he doesn't have to do this over the internet?
I think one, Amazon S3, their enterprise offering, does offer that with something they call Amazon Snowball, but that's expensive, and that's really for hundreds of terabytes. I don't know. I use a service called Crash Plan for my backups, which could help with something like this, and I pay about $120, I think, for unlimited backup, but it only backs up what's actually on your computer. You can't send it to Crash Plan and then delete it from your computer and just have it in Crash Plan alone. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So that's something you can look at. I think they might offer the ability to seed with a hard drive, but other than that, you might just have to look at buying big external hard drives and rotating them manually, meaning you copy your data to it and then go drive it across town to somebody else's house or something if you don't want to deal with the internet.
Yeah, I mean that's the same thing as a backup. Why does he need a professional service when he could do it himself?
I'm big with backups. For me, it needs to be automated, or it's not a real backup, because I'm going to forget or I'm going to screw it up or something like that. So for me, for a true backup, for data that's really important, I think it has to be automated. So unfortunately, that means spending money. So you might have to spend more money on cloud storage, and you might have to spend more money on faster internet to make that feasible.
Yeah.
And then just, at the end, it's value you're providing your customers by hanging on to that data, and you need to price your projects appropriately. Or reset expectations. That you will not be the one. Maybe provide them with, say, hey, for $100, here's a external hard drive with all your raw footage from this product. You hang on to it.
Well, and I always like to preach how DIY and cheap you can do video. Like anyone can do video. Most people can do video right now with the things they already have. But it is true that when you get into this as a business and you're doing a lot of this kind of work, there are a lot of costs associated with it, like the backup costs, which I haven't even figured out for myself. I need to do a much better job of backing up my work, and I guess Amazon Drive is out of the question now.
Yeah. Or the other thing we could do, I've thought about this, is like if you bought a Synology too, we could back up our stuff to each other. And then cut out the middlemen, and just help each other out that way.
Yeah. And then we'd have a solution that wouldn't help anyone. We could just say, Matt, you're screwed because you don't have a friend, Nick, who's sharing.
Well, I'm sure Matt has a friend, too.
Right. Well, we did it. We answered 12 questions today.
Boom. Which means we did not run out of questions yet again.
Yeah.
Just fantastic.
So, thank you, everyone, for sending in those questions, and we'll get to more next week. In fact, next week I will be in Kazakhstan when we record.
That's exciting.
I didn't even mention this. I feel like this is the first episode in a while that we've recorded where I get to be home.
I know. Must be nice, right?
Yeah.
Well, that means you're going to have your beautiful background and your light in the back and look so good, and my shot looks so crappy. It's okay, though.
So if anyone is in Almaty, Kazakhstan next week, June 16th to 18th, well, actually, I guess that's this weekend, I'll be there. I'm doing panels and keynote and a filmmaking workshop. And then, considering most of you are not in Almaty, Kazakhstan, but some of you may be in Sydney or Perth, I will be there at George's Cameras on July 15th, at the Digital Camera Warehouse on July 16th, at the SMPTE Trade Show, July 18th through 20th, and then I'll be in Perth at Photo Live Expo on July 23rd. So hopefully I can see you there.
That's exciting. That's exciting. I don't know if you looked when you were looking at PodTrack. I looked at it the other day, and it's a lot of downloads coming out of Australia. So my guess is you'll see some podcast listeners while you're out there.
Oh yeah, yeah. We have plenty of listeners in Southeast Asia, and I'm sure Australia as well.
Very good. All right. Well, Griffin, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for chatting with me.
Always good to talk to you.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
I feel like you're like the gate agent in Meet the Parents. You have like a comically loud typing behavior.
Well, I have a mechanical keyboard. They're designed to be loud.